Well, there's still lockdowns going on and lockdown light and the rest of it, but finally it seems like we have the makings of a path out of lockdown mania. The Prime Minister has today outlined a four-stage way for the country to carefully pick its way out of the restrictions, border closures and lockdowns that you know have been panicked, poorly coordinated, they've been damaging and most of the time unnecessary. Now, there are some hurdles to come for sure, and there's one very big setback today that should not have happened. I'll come to that later. But overall, it's a significant step forward. It's exactly what we've been calling for on this program. It's the Prime Minister seizing control of our pandemic response in the National Cabinet. Let's hope he can keep driving it this way. I'll talk to experts and politicians about all this tonight, but let's just go through some of the key points that show how the arguments and the expert analysis you've seen on this program over many months has now been reflected on this national agenda. It's almost as if the Prime Minister has been watching our program and taking notes.
Lockdowns in the current phase to be only used as a last resort was agreed today.
Hallelujah, hey? That sort of logic will sound very familiar to viewers of this program. Rather than the knee-jerk resort to what should be the last resort of major lockdowns. Yeah, that was just last week. And as you know, it's been a constant theme on this program. We also highlighted last week the more pragmatic approach that the Singaporean government is taking on these issues. And we followed up with a guest in Singapore last night. And today the Prime Minister cited Singapore to explain his new approach. His rhetoric on vaccination challenges also sounded familiar.
A lot of people say, well, why should I get vaccinated? They go, there's not much COVID around in Australia. I've got more chance of, I don't know, getting run over by a car than I have of catching COVID in this country.
A minute chance of getting sick from coronavirus versus a minute chance of getting sick from the vaccine. It ends up being a bit of a stalemate for many people, doesn't it?
We're prisoners of our own success.
They are all zero COVID proponents. They've made us prisoners of our own success. Yeah, there you go. Time to take advantage now of our success rather than be held hostage by it. Three key points of what the Prime Minister announced today is that he's begun immediately to set a threshold level of vaccination in the community. This is the absolutely core challenge here. He has said that there's going to be a threshold of vaccination, a vaccination rate across the nation at which we can kiss goodbye to lockdowns and other onerous restrictions. Once we hit that threshold, we can also reduce quarantine requirements for vaccinated people and exempt the vaccinated from a range of other restrictions. Again, this is what this program and many experts have been advocating for months. Now, this is exactly how we will proceed, although the threshold is yet to be set.
What we've agreed today is that by achieving vaccination, we move from that arrangement we have now, where it's all about community case transmission, and we move to a new period because you have the protection in place of a threshold vaccinated population. And that's what we have to achieve.
Yeah, look, this is a really good and a big move forward for the nation, and setting that threshold is now the most important pandemic management decision for this country. And anyone who's followed these issues for a while could see that that was going to be the case. And forgive me if I point out something that many of you will now recognise, and that is that the South Australian Chief Health Officer just 2 days ago tried to suggest this crucial question was a minor point.
Excuse me, I am here to provide information to the South Australian public, not to have an argument with you over a minor point. Thank you.
Minor point. The level at which we get country vaccination and reduce the alarm is not a minor point. Is 80% an unrealistically high level to reduce the threats of lockdowns and restrictions in this country?
Thank you, Harvey.
Can I please ask about home?
A minor point, eh? It is now the crucial decision that our Chief Medical Officer and others will be working to settle on. In a moment, I'll speak to an expert who says this threshold could be as low as 50%. That'll be a lot more achievable, of course, than 80%. But I mentioned the bad news as well, of course. Sadly, the Prime Minister has had to throw the most incompetent and panicky premiers a bone. Premiers like Anastasia Palaszczuk and Daniel Andrews wanted to reduce the number of people coming home to Australia through hotel quarantine, actually turning their back on their fellow Aussies because they seem to be incapable of running hotel quarantine or dealing with the inevitable occasional cross-infections. So the numbers of Australians returning home to this country through quarantine will be cut by 50% until that crucial vaccination threshold is met. All this, even though New South Wales, which has carried the heaviest load, was prepared to keep hosting 3,000 people a week.
So I am disappointed for those thousands of Australians that can't come home, but we will follow the National Cabinet decision, and I appreciate that some members of the community in New South Wales will be relieved at that, and I get that. But please don't assume this means that mistakes aren't going to happen. Please don't assume that outbreaks aren't going to happen just because the numbers have been reduced.
Yeah, this is very disappointing, very weak, very un-Australian. We have decided to cause more hardship for more Australians overseas, not to mention their loved ones waiting back here at home.
Our number one priority is to protect the health and safety of people in South Australia.
Yep, all about helping South Australians, eh? Unless they happen to be overseas. Just more evidence of how fear and incompetence costs us dearly, socially, in many ways, in this pandemic. Still, the quicker we get that vaccination threshold, remember that minor point, the quicker we get to that vaccination threshold, the quicker we can allow open access to everyone who is vaccinated. Bring it on and get your jab. Which reminds me, while Nicola Spurrier wasn't much chop at answering questions this week, the other day I went to one of her vaccine hubs and they had no trouble jabbing the minor point of a Pfizer needle into my arm. I'm on my way.